Welcome, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that has, well, captivated humanity for millennia. It's something that still echoes in our modern world, even if we don't always quite realize it.
Yeah.
I'm talking about curses. And to kick us off, let's think about a perception of a real-life curse. Something a Reddit user once described really vividly concerning the tragic fate of the USS Indianapolis.
Oh, that's a powerful story. It's truly harrowing, and I think it resonates so deeply because it taps into that, innate human desire to find meaning, maybe even patterns in really profound tragedy.
Absolutely. So the Indianapolis, on this highly secret mission, delivered a key component for the very first atomic bomb, Little Boy.
Right, the one destined for Hiroshima, a mission that fundamentally shifted global history, really ushering in the atomic age.
It did, and the ship completed that vital, world-altering mission. And then, almost immediately afterward, it was torpedoed in the Philippine Sea.
Yeah, what happened next was just unimaginable horror. It resulted in the single greatest loss of life at sea in U.S. Navy history.
Around 300 men went down with the ship itself, but nearly 900 more were left adrift, just floating in the water for 4 agonizing days.
4 days, facing dehydration, saltwater poisoning, exposure, and just relentless shark attacks. It's horrific to even contemplate.
Only 317 survived. And that Reddit user, they highlighted this sequence, delivering something so devastating, so world-changing, and then suffering such a horrific, unparalleled fate themselves. It felt to them like a tangible curse.
It did. It feels like cause and effect, even if it defies our normal logic.
Exactly. A perceived cause and effect that doesn't fit neatly into science or coincidence for some people.
And it really speaks to that deep-seated human need, doesn't it?
Oh,
To explain the inexplicable, to maybe attribute a larger purpose or even a kind of karmic consequence to events that just seem too devastating to be a random chance.
we look for patterns. We search for a narrative, even if it's one of like divine retribution or some kind of supernatural backlash.
Yeah, instinctively.
And that's precisely our mission for this deep dive today. We're going to transition from this kind of modern perception of a curse, like the Indianapolis story, to something much deeper, a really multifaceted phenomenon that has permeated human cultures for millennia.
Right.
We're going to explore what curses truly are, how they're understood across different societies, different historical periods, and their profound and often really surprising impact throughout history, and maybe even today.
And to do that, we've pulled from a really rich and diverse set of sources.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at rigorous academic works on folk magic, which are fascinating in themselves.
Uh-huh.
We've got ethnographic interviews that bring these ancient beliefs really vividly to life, hearing people talk about them.
Yeah.
Detailed historical accounts of actual ancient curse tablets dug up from archaeological sites,
Mm-hmm.
and even some really intricate linguistic analyses, looking at how taboo words function, what gives them their power.
So our goal, as always on the deep dive, is to cut through all that potential information overload, distill those surprising, sometimes counterintuitive, but always fascinating insights.
Yeah. Help you, our listener, become truly well-informed about this complex interplay of belief, language, and, well, perceived reality when it comes to curses.
Okay, so with that dramatic modern example of the Indianapolis sort of hanging in the air, it really begs the question, where does this deep-seated belief in curses actually come from?
Mm-hmm.
And for that, we need to go right to the very linguistic and folkloric heart of it all. Because it begins, fascinatingly, with the word itself. And as you found in the sources, it's so much more than just sounds.
It's an absolutely crucial starting point. You see, in many folk cultures, there's this fundamental, almost you could say primordial belief that word can be made flesh.
Okay, word can be made flesh, not just a metaphor then.
No, not just a flowery metaphor at all. It means whatever is uttered, whatever is spoken, can quite literally, tangibly come true. Which is, a really stark contrast to our modern, often scientific, logical views.
Right, we mostly see language as descriptive.
Right.
A tool to label things that already exist.
Exactly. But this other perspective views words as having a kind of primeval mindset. They don't just denote objects. They're seen as having an actual connection with the object, almost like being a part of it.
Wow. So the name of something isn't just a label, it's somehow linked to its essence.
Precisely. And it means that words are never empty. They're considered sui generis physical beings.
Sui generis, meaning?
Meaning unique, self-created entities. Like they have their own inherent power, their own properties and capabilities, almost like little creatures made of sound.
Okay, That changes everything.
Yeah.
Speaking isn't just communicating, it's like carving reality.
It is. It means a casual insult wasn't just rude, it was potentially physically destructive.
Hmm.
And a heartfelt blessing could literally shape someone's future. There's a wonderful anecdote in the sources that illustrates this perfectly. A field hand was asked to tell a story, and he claimed his stories were stored in a special bag that he'd forgotten in the forest.
Okay.
But when people pressed him, he apparently put his little finger to his ear, seemed to listen for a moment, and then declared that his little finger remembered one story. It just shows this material reality ascribed to
So
words.
the story wasn't just in his head, it was physically located, even in his finger.
That's how it was conceptualized. And you even see this in the concept of frozen words in folklore.
Frozen words.
Yeah, the idea that words spoken in intense cold could literally freeze in the air and then be heard later when it thawed, like a little time capsule of sound and meaning.
That is a staggering thought. It completely changes how you perceive every conversation, every single utterance. It forces this profound respect for language, doesn't it?
It really does.
It's not just about what you mean to say, but about what the words themselves might actually do.
Precisely. And this deep reverence for the word ties directly into what anthropologists like Malinowski called the magical structure of language.
Malinowski.
Yeah, right.
He argued that language wasn't just passive.
Not at all. He famously posited that words are part of action and they are equivalents to actions. He argued that words actively do act, produce, and achieve things in the world. They make things happen.
So anthropologists studying this aren't just looking at like grammar or meaning in the abstract.
No, they're looking at what Malinowski called the pragmatism or the effective force of words, how language performs, how it transforms reality.
So language isn't just for thinking or talking about the world, it's a direct way to act in the world, a tool for intervention.
Exactly.
What does that mean for how people in these cultures live day to day?
Yeah.
Does it create this constant like background anxiety about misspeaking?
It absolutely can create a sense of caution, yes. Malinowski introduced this idea of a dynamism of speech, basically a spectrum. At one end, you have sacred magical language chants, spells, prayers. At the other, you have secular everyday language gossip, instructions, jokes.
Okay.
But what's truly fascinating is his idea that both ends of the spectrum coexist universally in every culture. They influence each other. The magical informs the mundane, and vice versa.
Interesting. So even everyday chat might have a hint of magic, and rituals might use everyday words.
Kind of. And building on this, the linguist Izutsu took it further with his idea of a magical dimension of speech. He argued it's not just how we use language, but language's inherent structure itself that is magical.
The structure itself, like grammar.
Yeah, the very structure, the sounds, the rhythm, the connotations, what he called a connotative theory of linguistic magic. Think about how a perfectly crafted poem or powerful song can move you, right? It's not just the literal meaning.
No, it's the form, the delivery, the feeling.
Exactly. That inherent form carries a kind of charge, a depth of connotation that goes beyond the dictionary definition. Izutsu argued that this charge is inherently magical in its potential.
So the way we choose words, the sounds, even the grammar, could inherently carry a magical potential working in the background. That's almost unsettling.
It highlights a worldview where language is just constantly alive with potential, with power. Tombia's analysis of magical rites brings this home. He showed how they seamlessly combine both word and deed.
Word and deed together.
Yes. These rites often rely heavily on things like metaphor, may your strength be like a lion's, or metonymy, using a part to represent the whole, or analogy. He called it an imperative transfer of effects. You say it and you use an object or gesture, and the desired quality is believed to transfer.
So you're not just describing, you're commanding reality to change.
Exactly. Language becomes this potent tool for physically changing the reality, not just for communication. It's about direct, tangible influence.
Wow. Okay, that sets the stage perfectly then for understanding the semantic landscape of cursing in folk culture. Especially when we look at a language like Polish, where you found that single word klitsch just unpacks into so many different nuanced understandings of this verbal power. It's not just one simple thing, is it?
Oh, absolutely not. The polysemy, the multiple meanings of klitsch, is really revealing. It shows a deep, complex cultural understanding of verbal harm that goes way beyond our typical English concept of curse.
Okay, so let's break it down. What's the first meaning?
Right. So first there's cursing one or precheklich. This is the most direct form, basically signifying the act of wishing harm upon someone. This is your classic casting an anathema or formally denouncing a person.
Hmm.
Straightforward negative verbal intention, a direct attack with words.
Okay, that sounds familiar, like what most of us probably think of first when we hear the word curse. But then there's cursing too, wiclich. That sounds much more specific and frankly kind of terrifying in its implications.
It is. Wicklage refers specifically to religious excommunication. It's a formal, incredibly severe type of curse that completely severs ties. It literally means excluding from a community by ringing
By
bells.
ringing bells, wow.
Yeah, imagine the church bells, normally a sound of community or warning, instead tolling this mournful public declaration that you are utterly cut off. From your community, your family, your spiritual life, salvation itself.
That's heavy.
Our sources mention a chilling example where bells would be rung to literally ring out someone who was rejecting one faith for another, maybe converting from Catholic to Orthodox. It signified their permanent, devastating exclusion.
A public ritual banishment.
Exactly. And there were even associated rituals. People might place twisted and broken candles in church to curse others, symbolically snuffing out their light. Priests would apparently instruct them to remove these, acknowledging the perceived power even of these folk practices. It wasn't just a piece of paper, it was a powerful, public, ritually enforced banishment that could leave you utterly alone.
Utterly alone and vulnerable. Okay, that's intense. Now, cursing for, pritklinach, that sounds a bit more familiar to our modern ears, like swearing, expressing anger or frustration,
Yeah.
maybe just letting off steam.
It includes that, yes, venting anger, frustration. But even here, there's a much deeper layer in the folk understanding. It wasn't just venting. It also served a semi-magical purpose, acting as a substitute for action like verbal aggression instead of physical fighting. It could even be therapeutic, a way to release that pent-up negative energy.
Okay, makes sense.
However, and this is crucial, folk culture draws a direct and pretty terrifying link between this kind of swearing and the devil. It's seen as a profound sin, one that can actively invite demonic presence, potentially lead to demonic possession, or even condemn your soul to damnation.
So not just bad words, but literally inviting evil.
That's the belief. Proverbs like, "Don't mention the devil at midnight," or "Don't call the wolf out of the woods." These aren't just quaint sayings about politeness. They show a deep caution, a genuine fear about invoking evil forces through careless words. You are literally calling that which you speak into your presence.
So every swear word is potentially opening a door you really don't want opened.
And the consequences are believed to extend beyond this life, too. There's a strong folk belief that these bad words come back to you in the afterlife.
How so?
One saying suggests that speaking ill of others using these curse words results in you being covered in filth, dirt, and soot in the afterlife. A tangible, physical manifestation of your verbal sins, even after death. It shapes your eternal fate.
That certainly puts a different spin on complaining or road rage. It's not just social awkwardness, it's potential cosmic filth.
It really raises the stakes on speech ethics.
Definitely. Okay, which brings us to another fascinating shade of cursing in Polish. Cursing 5, zaklinać. This translates to conjuration. How does this one differ from just, wishing someone harm?
This form, zaklinać, involves persistent begging or imploring, but it's way more than just a simple plea. It's aimed at magically binding someone or coercing them to do what you want, using spiritual leverage.
Binding them. How?
The power comes from invoking the highest possible authority like God or all that is holy, maybe the saints. By calling on these ultimate powers, the belief is that it makes refusal utterly impossible for the person being addressed. You're essentially putting them under a spell or compelling them by the sheer weight of divine authority. It's spiritual coercion.
Got it. Using the ultimate authority to force someone's hand. And finally, cursing 6, zaklinać, swearing a vow or a conditional curse. This one sounds unique because the curse is aimed at the speaker themselves. What's the point of that?
It is really unique and profoundly powerful in this worldview. In this form, zaklinać, the curse is conditionally directed against yourself. It serves as a solemn oath to absolutely guarantee your word is kept.
Like, if I break this promise, may I be cursed.
Exactly that. May this horrible thing happen to me if I'm lying or break my word. Traditional oath-taking involved specific rituals, raising fingers towards heaven, maybe having a priest oversee it, kissing a cross, or some other sacred object.
And the consequences if you broke such an oath.
Believed to be incredibly severe. not just for the individual, but often for their entire lineage. A family could be cursed unto the third generation, maybe even longer, with children potentially born blind or stupid, a direct, visible consequence of the ancestors' perjury.
Wow, generations paying for one broken oath.
Yeah. This deep fear explains why there was historical trepidation peasants swear an oath at court. They weren't just worried about human judges, they were terrified of divine punishment for perjury, for breaking that sacred verbal bond. It speaks to a profound belief in the power and sanctity of your spoken word.
It really does.
Yeah.
So just unpacking these different shades of cursing in one language makes it crystal clear that it's far from a simple concept. It's deeply tangled up with social rules, religious beliefs, and this perceived very real power of language. This nuanced understanding then leads us directly to the question of who or what actually agents these curses in the folk worldview.
Yeah.
Who's really pulling the strings? Who's doing the cursing?
Well, interestingly, in many of these folk cultures, the ultimate source, the ultimate punitive judge, the cosmic orchestrator, is often seen as God.
God.
Right.
Not like witches or demons primarily.
Primarily, God is seen as the ultimate agent, the one who established and maintains the world order, the ultimate source of what they call agential speech, speech that does things. The belief is that God hears curse words, especially those uttered with real deep emotion or justified intent.
Right.
And then God decides on the punishment. So God functions as both the initiator of the curse, the one who gives it legitimacy, and often the executor of it through various means.
So when something terrible happens, the drought, an earthquake, a flood in this view, these aren't just random natural events. They could be interpreted as God's direct punishment, a manifestation of a divine curse.
Precisely. These large-scale natural disasters are often seen as direct manifestations of divine judgment, a collective curse on a community, perhaps for some collective sin or transgression.
And there are specific examples of groups being seen as cursed.
Yes, and this is where it gets disturbing. Our sources reveal a profound and tragic belief, held within some folk narratives, that the Jewish people are self-cursed.
Self-cursed.
Yes, for their perceived role in Jesus' death. This was seen by some as an unforgivable sin resulting in an inexorable fate, the interpretation being that they themselves called down this curse upon their own heads and their descendants. It's a deeply problematic belief, obviously, used to justify centuries of prejudice, but it was historically present in some folk traditions.
That's a chilling example of how these beliefs can be twisted to target entire groups. Now, you mentioned earlier that the Virgin Mary can sometimes appear as an executor of curses. That seems really counterintuitive, doesn't it, given her usual role as a figure of mercy, protection?
It does seem counterintuitive, and it is indeed an exceptional and definitely secondary role for her. While she's primarily revered as a protectress, an intercessor, Mary can, surprisingly, appear in this secondary role as an executor of God's punishment, especially in certain folk formulas.
Like what kind of formulas?
You might hear phrases like, "May the Mother of God punish you." Now, this isn't interpreted as her acting independently against her usual protective nature.
Okay.
Rather, it's seen as her serving as a kind of stand-in for God, a sort of a substitute female judge. She's acting as a conduit, carrying out the divine decree when she's invoked in that specific punitive way.
I see. So she's channeling God's judgment in those cases.
Mm.
And the devil, surely he's a primary agent of curses. That seems like his main job description.
You'd think so, but this is a really crucial and often misunderstood distinction in the folk worldview. The devil himself cannot curse. He cannot initiate a curse.
Really?
He can't. No. Instead, he's seen as someone who flies around people carrying curses, especially those swear words, cursing for, we talked about. And he tempts people into further sin. But crucially, he is the executor of curses.
Executor, meaning?
Meaning, he carries out the state of being cursed once God has judged it to be justified. There's a proverb that captures it perfectly. When God judges you, so does the devil. The devil doesn't make the decision. He enforces the divine punishment. He's the enforcer, not the legislator, in this cosmic court.
Okay, that's a very different picture than usually portrayed. So God judges, the devil executes. What about humans then? Where do they fit in? Are they just victims or bystanders?
No, humans play a key role, but again, not usually as the ultimate agents. Individuals like mothers, fathers, or anyone who's been profoundly wronged are seen as performers of the ritual of cursing, whether they do it consciously or not.
Performers, like actors in a play.
In a way. When a curse is uttered and it's believed to be justified, meaning the target genuinely deserved it because of a transgression, then these human performers are considered mediators. They become God's helpers, acting as a conduit for divine justice to flow through.
So if you curse someone who truly wronged you, you're helping God deliver justice.
That's the framework, yes.
Hmm.
However, there are also special cases, sorcerers, healers, people who are in the know, who possess esoteric knowledge. They are believed to be able consciously oblige the power to act as they wish, manipulating these forces more directly.
Ah, so some people can direct the power more intentionally.
Yes, but even then, the system is seen as self-correcting and morally bound. An unjustified curse, one that the target hasn't actually earned through their actions, is believed to often rebound onto the performer.
It backfires.
Exactly, which highlights that the true agency, the ultimate power, is still seen as residing with the divine or with a universal moral order, not just with human ill will or magical skill. You can't just curse anyone you dislike with impunity.
That nuanced understanding of agency, with God, Mary, the devil, and humans all having specific roles, really highlights the complexity here. It's not a simple, I say bad things happen. There's a whole cosmic bureaucracy and a moral framework involved,
There really is. It's almost like the universe has its own internal justice system with checks and balances.
which helps explain why these weren't just abstract ideas, but deeply ingrained practical tools and constant considerations in daily life and how people interacted.
Definitely. This elaborate framework sets us up to understand how curses were put into practice historically.
Right, and we can see this even more clearly when we look at curses in practice, and their historical applications, and the cultural norms that sort of govern them. Let's start way back with what you might call the ancient technologies of cursing, curse tablets.
Ah, yes, curse tablets, known as defictiones in Latin or katatismoi in Greek. They are a truly fascinating window into ancient cursing practices. And they were incredibly popular, a long-lived and extremely successful artifact type.
Successful, meaning they were thought to work.
Well, they were certainly used widely and for a very long time across the entire Mediterranean basin, ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, even out into Celtic Britain. Hundreds, thousands have been found. Their widespread presence over centuries definitely speaks to their perceived efficacy and utility.
And were they all the same, like a standard curse form?
Not at all. Their use wasn't uniform, it adapted locally. People customized this technology to fit their specific needs, their local contexts, often incorporating local deities or magical symbols. They were usually made from thin sheets of lead being associated with the underworld, but sometimes bronze or even wax or pottery shards. And they'd be inscribed with specific formulas.
Okay, so what were they used for? Just generally wishing bad luck on your enemies? Or was it more specific?
Far from just general ill-wishing, their purposes were often quite varied and surprisingly pragmatic. Some were definitely preventative.
Preventative, like warding something off.
Kind of, like trying to frustrate and bind speakers in legal cases in classical Athens. You'd write a curse hoping to literally tie their tongue, make them forget their arguments, effectively silence your opponent in court.
Wow, supernatural legal maneuvering.
Exactly. Others were retaliatory, used against thieves, for instance. These are often called prayers for justice. You see examples from Roman Britain or Iberia where someone asks the gods to punish the person who stole their cloak or their money, seeking supernatural redress for a crime when maybe human justice failed.
So getting the gods involved when the cops couldn't help.
Essentially, yes. And some were used to influence future events, probably the most famous type being love spells trying to compel someone to fall in love with you, or maybe ensure a partner's fidelity, binding them to you.
That's a pretty broad spectrum of intent, from court battles to romance. And once they wrote these things, what did they do with them? Just leave them on the person's doorstep.
No, their deployment was quite specific and ritualistic, reflecting the intended outcome and the kind of chthonic or underworld forces they were trying to invoke. They'd often be carefully folded or rolled up, maybe pierced with a nail to fix the target.
Ouch.
Yeah. And then they might be thrown into water sources, wells, springs, baths, believed to carry the curse down to the underworld deities who could enact it. Or they could be nailed up in temples or shrines, asking for a specific god's intercession.
So different methods for different goals.
Seems like it. Sometimes they were dropped into fire pits, maybe to symbolically burn away the target's power or health. But probably the most common method was placing them in graves,
In graves. Why?
particularly the graves of those who had died prematurely or violently. Their restless spirits, the aoroi, were thought to be powerful, angry, and easily compelled to carry out curses for the living. Placing the tablet in their grave was like giving them a direct instruction. The method of placement was a crucial part of the ritual, believed to connect the curse to the appropriate supernatural realm.
Okay, that's dark, but makes a
Yes.
certain kind of sense within that logic. What's really interesting is that you said these weren't aimed at like the Senate or the emperor or big institutions, despite all the political chaos back then. They seem very personal.
Absolutely. Our sources really emphasize that curse tablets were used exclusively within personal relationships between humans. Rivalries between neighbors, business competitors, chariot racers, lovers, legal opponents.
So neighborly disputes taken to a supernatural level.
Pretty much. They were never directed against legislative bodies, states, or even magistrates acting in their official capacity. They were aimed with precision at a particular person, sometimes by name, or sometimes at opponents whose names weren't known, but were clearly defined by their actions, like whoever stole my silver cup.
And who are they appealing to?
That's key. Gods, demons, spirits of the dead, various supernatural beings, they were always the object of the appeal, the power being invoked to carry out the curse. But these beings were never the target for magic themselves. You weren't cursing Zeus, you were asking Zeus or Hecate or Hermes to curse your rival for you.
Got it. And the language used, was it always like formal Latin or Greek?
Mostly, yes, those were the dominant languages, the lingua franca of the Mediterranean. But there's a fascinating linguistic element here. We find some tablets written deliberately in vernacular languages.
Like local dialects.
Exactly, like Gaulish being used by Roman citizens in Gaul. This underscores the human agency involved. It shows people adapting these practices, transmitting them across diverse social and ethnic contexts, but making them their own. Using their own tongue, perhaps believing it lent the curse a more familiar ancestral power, even under Roman rule. It wasn't just blindly copying a Roman ritual, it was integrating it.
So curse tablets were this practical, highly personalized tool, adapted across cultures for centuries. That naturally leads us forward in time to medieval Europe. Cursing there seems like it was almost part of daily life, not just something for powerful witches or bishops doing formal excommunications.
Indeed. In medieval Europe, cursing was far from being solely a dark, esoteric art practiced in secret covens. It was often perceived as both a spiritual act and a practical tool, something deeply embedded in the daily lives of common people.
So your average peasant might resort to a curse.
Absolutely. If your crops were failing, if your neighbor's cow kept wandering into your field, if someone insulted you or cheated you and you couldn't afford a lawyer or expect justice from the local lord, well, you might turn to what historians sometimes call low magic.
Low magic, as opposed to high magic.
Yeah, not necessarily complex ceremonial stuff, but smaller everyday acts meant to influence fortune, ward off harm, or inflict a bit of misfortune on someone who deserved it, in your view. It wasn't exclusive to witches or the clergy with their formal anathemas, it was much more widespread.
And these low magic curses, they weren't vague, like bad things happen to you, right? They were apparently incredibly specific.
Oh, wildly specific. They often invoked very personal, very visceral consequences. Specific diseases, madness, impotence was a common one, or divine justice tailored to the perceived crime, hitting people where it hurt, basically.
Can you give some examples? What do they sound like?
Court records and grimoires, those medieval spellbooks, they contain some vivid examples. You might find something dramatic like, may worms eat your tongue and demons drag your bones to hell. Classic stuff.
Right.
But also more practical, everyday things targeting livelihood or well-being. May your beer turn sour in your belly and your sheep birth no lambs this spring. Or curses aimed at causing arguments between spouses or making animals sick.
And the methods still lead tablets.
Less often led tablets by then, more readily available materials. The methods were often equally low-tech, but powerfully symbolic. Carving wax figures, poppets, to represent the person and then melting them or sticking pins in them. Muttering specific prayers or incantations, maybe over stolen personal items. Using things like knotted cords or stolen chicken bones arranged in a certain pattern. Burying magically prepared objects, maybe even dolls, under an enemy's doorstep, hoping to bring illness or bad luck right into their home.
Simple, but probably quite effective psychologically, at least. And these weren't always just dismissed as superstition. They sometimes ended up in court.
Yes, absolutely. These low magic acts, these neighborhood curses, sometimes did result in actual court cases, especially if the curse was perceived to have worked. If the target suffered demonstrable misfortune, illness, or financial loss shortly after being cursed, they might take the cursor to court. People took this seriously enough to seek legal remedy. It really highlights the very real impact these beliefs had on people's lives, their social interactions, and even the legal system. It was a blend of spiritual fear and a search for practical justice.
So from ancient tablets to medieval muttered spells, the perceived power of the spoken word of focused intent was a constant force. But there's one particular type of curse that seems to carry an immense enduring power across many cultures and has a unique moral weight attached to it. Parental curses.
Ah, yes. This is an incredibly potent category in folk belief, especially in cultures with very strong familial ties and hierarchical structures, because it ties directly into the fundamental fabric of socio-ethical order, the parent-child bond.
So why would a parent curse their child? What kind of transgressions warranted such a severe response?
Typically, children are cursed for direct, severe disobedience, profound disrespect, which could even include physical harm to a parent, a huge taboo, or a rejection of traditional values that are seen as fundamental to the community's moral code and continuity.
Like what kind of values?
Things like excessive drinking, committing serious crimes like theft or murder, displaying open godlessness or atheism in a deeply religious community, or, as we saw with the bell-ringing curse, converting to a different faith against the family's wishes.
So a sinful child in this context isn't just someone who, makes a mistake. They're seen as fundamentally disobedient, someone who deliberately places themselves outside the community's moral boundaries and, crucially, outside the protective blessing of their parents.
Exactly. And perhaps one of the most common and deeply impactful transgressions, particularly for girls but also for boys, that could lead to parents withholding their blessing, resulting in this dire, non-blessed state or state of the curse, was the loss of virginity
What?
or loss of innocence outside of a sanctioned marriage.
Right, that was often seen as a major breach.
Huge. It wasn't just about personal shame, it was perceived as a breach of family honor, a disruption of the divinely ordained social order. Folk songs frequently feature mothers cursing daughters for exactly this transgression, showing how deeply ingrained this consequence was in the collective mind. It
Mhm.
wasn't just parental disapproval, it was seen as breaking fundamental community norms, inviting spiritual and social disaster.
And the impact of these parental curses. How dangerous are they truly perceived to be for the child? Is it just bad luck or something deeper, more lasting?
The folk belief is absolutely clear. When a mother curses her child, the curse comes true. It is very dangerous. It's believed it can stay with the child even for their whole life. It's seen as a profound, often inescapable shadow cast over their entire
A
existence.
lifelong burden.
Yes, our sources provide a particularly compelling and heartbreaking example. A mother curses her daughter who is defying her tearful pleas and marrying outside the faith, specifically a Catholic mother whose daughter is marrying an Orthodox man. The mother cries out, "May you never get there." And on the way to the wedding, the daughter's wagon crashes and she breaks her arm. But the curse's shadow doesn't stop there. Later in life, she gives birth to two sons, both retarded. This narrative powerfully conveys a direct, devastating, multi-generational impact attributed to that single emotionally charged curse uttered in a moment of deep pain and anger.
Wow. That's like direct, almost biblical retribution playing out over years. And sometimes these aren't even fully intentional. Can a parent accidentally curse their child?
That's a truly fascinating and frankly terrifying point within this belief system. The answer is yes. Even a careless mother, perhaps uttering something in a moment of extreme anger or frustration, "I wish you'd never been born," or something similar without truly meaning lasting ill,
Hmm.
can still act as an instrument of divine justice.
Huh. She doesn't mean it.
It's especially potent if the curse is uttered at a particular hour, sometimes called the evil hour, a time when the veil between worlds is thin, or specific cosmic forces are believed to be aligned and listening. The underlying power that guards order and justice can simply use her words as a conduit, regardless of her full intent. She doesn't consciously decide the punishment. The force itself acts through her words because the child's prior actions might have earned it. It speaks to the immense, almost uncontrollable power attributed to words in this worldview.
So even without full conscious intent, the words themselves, under specific circumstances, can carry this immense, potentially irreversible weight. That really connects parental curses directly to the importance of the fourth commandment, honor your father and your mother, in maintaining that socio-ethical order and the continuity of tradition.
Yes, absolutely. This isn't just seen as abstract religious dogma. It's viewed as the very foundation of social cohesion and respect for elders and tradition. Folk songs, morality plays, even those little marketplace leaflets or chapbooks frequently reinforce these moral teachings against filial disrespect. They painted vivid pictures of the dire consequences awaiting those who dishonored their parents.
So the curse is almost like the enforcement mechanism for that commandment.
In a way, yes. And ultimately, the state of being cursed, that kursek, the enduring misfortune, is often framed as a self-induced state. It's the child's sin, their transgression, that necessitates the ritual of the curse that opens the door for it. It emphasizes personal accountability within this broader cosmic and moral order. The child, through their actions, effectively invites the curse upon themselves.
This profound respect for, and perhaps fear of, the spoken word brings us to a related concept that seems crucial: taboos and speech ethics. Basically, how cultures actively tried to guard the word given its perceived power.
Precisely. If words have such power, it makes perfect sense that there would be strict rules, prohibitions around certain utterances.
Like not cursing your parents.
Exactly. There's a strict folk moral code stating a child may not speak ill against her parents. This isn't just considered rude or disrespectful, it's seen as a grave sin that God himself will punish directly and severely.
And it's not just words, right? Physical actions, too.
Oh, yes. Drawing a powerful parallel, there are equally severe consequences believed to follow physical violence against parents. There's that chilling folk tale found in various forms of a wicked child whose hand, having struck their parents, literally stuck out of the grave after they died.
Stuck out of the ground.
Yes, refusing to be buried, a visible sign of their transgression. And in the story, the hand only receded back into the earth after the surviving parent, often the mother, came and whipped it with a rod, sometimes a birch rod, from which a birch tree then miraculously grew. It's a literal physical manifestation of the sin against a parent, persisting even beyond the grave until ritually addressed.
That's incredibly graphic. A very clear message. So, both spoken and physical actions against parents carry these serious supernatural penalties. But it's not just about parents, is it? The sources talk about the power of names in general, knowing them, using them correctly, and maybe the danger of misusing them.
Absolutely. Names hold immense power in these systems. There's a strong, widespread belief that knowing and invoking the proper name of something, a person, an object, a spirit, even an ailment, grants you a degree of power or control over it.
How would that be used?
Well, it can be used beneficially.
Mm.
For example, in folklore, knowing the true name of werewolves is sometimes said to be the key to revert them to human form, breaking the curse or enchantment. Or, in a more everyday folk remedy context, if you get a little sore or pimple on your tongue and that be believed to be caused by someone gossiping about you.
Right.
The cure: try to guess the name of the person who's talking about you. If you guess the right name, the pimple is supposed to disappear. The act of correctly naming brings the hidden cause to light and restores order.
Fascinating. And even for restless spirits.
Yes. There are accounts of people trying to quiet the incessant crying of what were believed to be unbaptized souls, often infants stuck between worlds. The method: give them names. Simply baptizing them verbally with common names like Christopher or Christine was believed to grant them peace and quiet them down. Naming brings them into the fold, gives them identity, and resolves their liminal state. It's a powerful idea of verbal control, bringing peace through nomenclature. It really is. It speaks to this idea that naming imposes order, gives substance. But this immense power also means there are significant dangers, word taboos, and severe consequences believed to follow from breaking them, from misnaming things.
Okay, look, what kind of taboos?
Well, for instance, calling a child a frog, not as an affectionate nickname, but as a genuine derogatory term, could be believed to cause the child to literally develop frog-like characteristics.
Seriously? Like what?
Like ulcers in the mouth or a persistent lisp. And the only way to prevent this, if you slipped up and said it, was to perform an immediate countermeasure, like quickly saying garlic under the tongue or some other apotropaic phrase to ward off the negative effect of your own words.
Wow. So the word itself has that direct power. And this connects to the idea that if you misname someone, maybe call them a monster out of anger, that could literally create a real monster, like cause a physical deformity.
Yes, that's the terrifying logic within this folk worldview, because, as the sources state, empty words cannot exist. Every uttered word is believed to have the potential to create its signified, its reality. So calling someone a monster isn't just an insult, it's potentially a creative act of malice. It could, in this view, result in something like a hunchbacked baby being born later or some other physical deformity.
And that's seen as a sin.
A profound sin. Not only against the person being mislabeled, but also against God and against language itself. Because you're breaking the intrinsic, divinely ordained rules that connect words to reality. You're warping reality with ill-considered, hateful speech.
The responsibility attached to speaking is immense.
It really is. And the power of words is considered so profound that even purely accidental verbal mistakes, especially in sacred contexts, could have dire outcomes. For example, there was a belief that if a priest, during a baptism, accidentally misspoke and said wraith instead of faith,
Oh dear.
it could potentially, irrevocably, turn that child into a ghoul or a vampire later in life. A single slip of the tongue altering a soul's destiny.
That's terrifying. And going back to the devil, those proverbs about not mentioning, like the devil only waits until he is summoned or his name is uttered by chance, they really underscore this very real perceived danger of invocation through naming.
Indeed. Swearing, that cursing for, as we discussed, is viewed as a grave sin precisely because it can directly summon these evil powers. It's a verbal invitation. You're basically putting out a welcome mat for demons through foul language.
And there's even a hierarchy to who you can safely curse or swear at.
Yes, there seems to be a social hierarchy involved. While a spouse, interestingly, might sometimes be considered a stranger in certain contexts and thus potentially subject to curses without immediate rebound.
A stranger, your
In
spouse.
terms of blood ties, yes. Whereas children and parents are blood, they are considered fundamentally connected and thus untouchable by intentional curses from within the family, without grave consequences, often rebounding on the cursor or being seen as justified only by the target's own extreme transgression. Cursing your own blood is particularly perilous.
So the very fabric of language, how it's used, the names we call things, the oaths we swear, who we swear, it's all part of this intricate moral and mystical economy in folk culture with very real, tangible, perceived consequences.
Exactly, it shapes behavior, reinforces social norms, and explains misfortune.
Which brings us squarely to the very real and perceived impacts of these curses. How did they actually manifest in people's lives according to these folk traditions? What did a curse look like in practice?
Well, the impact of curses was believed to manifest in incredibly profound and tangible ways, hitting people right where they lived, their bodies, their fortunes, their social standing. Particularly, there's a strong, pervasive connection drawn between diseases, sin, and Satan.
Disease is a curse.
Very often, yes. In this framework, the devil is frequently held directly responsible for ailments, acting as that executor of divine judgment or carrying out human-invoked curses. The boundaries between a physical disease and the evil spirit or curse that sent it become terrifyingly blurred. Is it just illness or is it demonic influence? Often it was seen as both.
So someone might suddenly experience lameness or lose the ability to speak or even start barking like a dog, and these wouldn't be seen as just random medical issues, but potentially direct results of a curse.
Absolutely. Our sources document many examples of curse-induced physical consequences, like sudden blindness, paralysis, inability to speak, strange skin conditions, or even those terrifying transformations into animalistic behavior, like uncontrollable barking or twitching.
Are there specific curses for diseases?
Yes, specific curse formulas directly invoke these maladies. There's one chilling phrase mentioned: "May 300 Kadooks kidnap you." And in that context, Kaduk apparently refers simultaneously to both the devil and a particularly nasty disease, possibly epilepsy or something similar. The link is explicit.
Wow. And beyond specific ailments.
Direct death, obviously, was seen as a possible outcome. Or just a profound inability to thrive, wasting diseases, infertility, children dying young, all could be attributed to a curse's power.
And beyond the physical body, there's this pervasive belief that a cursed person experiences a life just steeped in misfortune and failure, almost as if destiny itself has actively turned against them.
That's precisely right. For the person believed to be cursed, the perception is that nothing goes as he wishes. A failure comes after a failure. It's not just a bad week or a run of bad luck. It's a chronic, grinding state of ill fortune that permeates everything.
How would that manifest? Like what kind of misfortunes?
It could be severe marital strife, constant arguments, domestic violence, infidelity, the marriage just falling apart,
Yeah.
chronic illness that jumps around, affecting various body parts, never fully healing, inexplicable financial ruin, businesses failing, crops dying, animals getting sick, or just a general unending streak of bad luck that plagues every single endeavor they undertake. A feeling of being constantly thwarted.
Are there specific curse formulas for that kind of general bad luck?
Yes, things like, "May misfortune swallow him," or "May you go to waste, you sick soul." These invoke a general state of decay and failure. Such a state, this pervasive feeling of being under a dark cloud, ultimately leads to a loss of health, wealth, happiness, and crucially, a perceived loss of God's protection, leaving the individual feeling vulnerable, isolated, and adrift.
We also touched on the really powerful imagery of the lightning curse, often invoked by a parent, especially a mother, upon a deeply disobedient child. What's the profound symbolic meaning behind that specific, dramatic form of divine punishment?
Lightning holds incredibly potent symbolism in folk mythology. It's often seen as representing the cosmic battle between good and evil, God and the devil. It acts as a direct, visible instrument of divine power, used for restoring cosmic order, punishing the wicked, or sometimes even signaling divine favor.
So being struck by lightning wasn't just seen as a random accident.
Rarely. There is often a dualistic, almost paradoxical interpretation. A person struck by lightning might be seen as so profoundly sinful that God directly intervenes to kill them, purifying the earth of their presence. Or conversely, in some interpretations, they might be seen as so utterly sinless and pure that God takes them directly to heaven, bypassing the pains of purgatory, a strange mix of purification, punishment, and sometimes even reward.
That's complex.
It is, but the lasting sign of a curse delivered by lightning, even after death, is often described as the body being turned into char. A horrifying, unmistakable mark indicating the curse's power reaching beyond the grave, showing the individual was touched by immense, overwhelming cosmic forces.
It sounds like these folk narratives, even the ones describing these huge, mythical, cataclysmic events like being struck by lightning, are often kind of rationalized or distilled down into more everyday moral lessons for the community.
They absolutely are. That's a key function of folklore. For instance, in folk songs or cautionary tales, a really severe act, like a child physically beating their mother, which might warrant a lightning curse in its most dramatic mythical form, gets generalized down to just disrespect in the everyday moral lesson.
Okay.
And the mythical death by lightning might be reinterpreted in the song's moral as simply leading a vain struggle in life, or having an unhappy life filled with misfortune and failure. The core moral message, the grave consequences of disrespecting parents or breaking taboos, is preserved and applied to daily life, even if the original mythical event is softened or generalized to make it more relatable or less terrifying for broader application.
Moving beyond these individual misfortunes, whether physical or general bad luck, there's this really fascinating and often quite heavy concept of generational curses. These aren't just about one person's bad luck hitting them now, but something believed to be deeply woven through entire family histories, seemingly passed down like a toxic inheritance.
Exactly. Generational curses are often described in these traditions, and even in some modern therapeutic contexts, drawing on these ideas as invisible threads. Threads woven through family histories, profoundly shaping behaviors, beliefs, relationships, even health outcomes across multiple lineages. The belief is that a single significant transgression by an ancestor, maybe perjury, murder, betrayal, a potent grace received, can cast this incredibly long shadow.
A shadow affecting descendants who might have no conscious knowledge of the original event.
Precisely. Descendants who may have no direct connection to or even awareness of the original sin are believed to still suffer its consequences.
Like what? What are the common ways these curses are thought to manifest across generations? How do they actually show up in family lines?
They can manifest in a terrifyingly wide array of persistent destructive patterns. We see things like addiction, chronic alcoholism, maybe gambling appearing repeatedly in a family line, almost like clockwork, broken relationships, pervasive patterns of divorce, infidelity, an inability to form lasting, healthy bonds, chronic mental illnesses, severe depression, anxiety, perhaps even psychosis that seem to run in families without a clear genetic explanation in every case.
And physical issues, too.
Yes, even persistent physical ailments, strange accidents, or patterns of early death that seem to plague specific families generation after generation. It's believed that the negative energy, the spiritual debt, or the unresolved trauma just ripples through the family tree, impacting descendants sometimes centuries later.
So how on earth does one even begin to address something perceived to be so deeply ingrained, so historical, so inescapable? Is there a way to break these cycles, or are you just perpetually burdened by your ancestors' actions?
Fortunately, most traditions that acknowledge generational curses also offer pathways, however difficult, to break them. It requires a conscious, often very challenging effort. It typically involves profound self-reflection, looking honestly at your own life and family patterns. It requires honest communication within the family, which can mean uncovering long-held, painful secrets. And it usually involves targeted interventions.
What kind of interventions?
These can be spiritual, like specific prayers, rituals seeking church intervention. They can be psychological therapy to address inherited traumas and dysfunctional patterns, or they can be communal acts making amends, seeking reconciliation. A particularly powerful tool mentioned in our sources for understanding these patterns is the genogram.
A genogram, that's like a detailed family tree, right?
Yeah.
But mapping more than just names and dates.
Exactly. It's much more in depth. By meticulously mapping out family histories, not just births, deaths, marriages, but also key events, major illnesses, physical and mental, patterns of addiction, migration, financial successes or failures, relationship dynamics, and crucially, any known or suspected curses or major transgressions individuals can gain invaluable insights.
How does that help break the curse?
It helps identify the specific, deeply rooted patterns and behaviors that have been passed down, often unconsciously. It helps pinpoint the potential origin or nature of the perceived curse, the source of the recurring misfortune. And in doing so, it provides a kind of roadmap for the work that lies ahead, whether that work involves seeking specific spiritual intervention, engaging in therapy to break cycles, or making conscious choices to live differently than previous generations. It makes the invisible visible.
Can you give us a real-life example from the source material that really illustrates the perceived power and longevity of such a generational curse? Something concrete.
Certainly. There's a particularly chilling account documented in one ethnography. It concerns a man who committed perjury specifically for insurance fraud. He deliberately set his own buildings on fire and then testified under solemn oath that it was accidental to collect the money.
Okay, that's a serious transgression, especially given the views on oath-breaking we discussed.
Extremely serious. And his uncle, upon hearing of this grave act, reportedly warned him solemnly, saying something like, "God will keep punishing you until the 9th generation for this perjury and deceit."
9th generation. Wow.
Yes. And according to the family's oral history, their subsequent experiences were directly attributed back to this single profound act of dishonesty by that ancestor. They recounted generations experiencing unusually tough lives, pervasive mental illness running through the family, children being born with unexplained persistent rashes on their faces.
Physical manifestations, too.
Yes. And one particularly tragic story of a daughter in a later generation who didn't marry well, suffered constant, inexplicable persecution throughout her life, and eventually died at the age of 40. The folk belief, as recorded, held that even Jesus wasn't treated worse than her. This family narrative paints this vivid, terrifying picture of a curse believed to span many, many generations, all stemming from that one ancestor's grave transgression. It served as a powerful, living warning within that family against dishonesty and breaking one's sacred word.
That's incredibly powerful and really illustrates the perceived long-term weight of a single act on an entire lineage. Okay, so from these deeply personal family legacies, let's shift perspective a bit to some more widely known famous curses. And maybe consider whether they're fact, folklore, or perhaps a fascinating blend of both. Starting with cursed objects.
Right. Cursed objects definitely capture the public imagination, probably because they offer a tangible focus point for misfortune, something you can point to. The general premise, usually, is that these objects are believed to have been stolen from their rightful owners or looted from a sanctuary, like a temple or a tomb, and thus they carry this karmic debt or supernatural vengeance attached to them.
Like the classic example, the Hope Diamond.
Exactly. The Hope Diamond is probably the most famous. It's the stunning blue diamond steeped in centuries of dramatic, often embellished tales. Legend attributes a long string of misfortunes, madness, murder, suicide, financial ruin, tragic accidents to its various owners, stretching back allegedly to its theft from an Indian temple through French royalty like Louis VI and Marie Antoinette, right up to American socialites in the 20th century. How much is fact and how much is legend is debatable, but the story is powerful.
It certainly is. And what about Busby's stoop chair? That sounds ominous.
Oh, that's a chilling local legend from North Yorkshire in England. The story goes that a murderer named Thomas Busby, shortly before his execution back in 1702, cursed his favorite oak chair in the local pub.
Cursed a chair?
Yes, supposedly declaring that anyone who dared to sit in his chair would meet a sudden and terrible death. And chillingly, local lore claims a string of fatal accidents and mysterious deaths did actually befall people who subsequently sat in it over the next couple of centuries.
Seriously?
So the story goes. It got such a bad reputation that eventually the pub owner donated it to the local museum in Thirsk, where to this day it hangs safely 5 feet off the ground on a wall, ensuring no one can ever accidentally sit in it again. Whether true or not, the fear it inspired was real.
That one definitely sounds like something out of a horror movie. Okay, and of course, perhaps the most famous curse legend of all, the Curse of the Pharaohs.
Ah, yes, King Tut. This narrative just exploded into global public consciousness with the sensational discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922 by Howard Carter and his financial backer, Lord Carnarvon.
Right, a huge media event.
Huge. And the subsequent, seemingly inexplicable deaths of some of the people involved shortly after the tomb was opened really fueled the story, especially Lord Carnarvon himself. He died just a few months later in Cairo.
How did he die?
Officially from blood poisoning, sepsis, that developed from an infected mosquito bite on his cheek, which he apparently nicked while shaving. But the timing was just too perfect for the newspapers.
And it ran with it.
Oh, completely. Newspapers, eager for a dramatic, exotic tale, amplified the idea of an ancient mummy's curse. They linked Carnarvon's death and a few others that followed over the next few years among visitors or team members to supposed inscriptions found in the tomb promising swift death to anyone who disturbed the pharaoh's eternal rest.
But wasn't Howard Carter himself, the guy who actually discovered it and spent the most time inside the tomb, wasn't he relatively unaffected? Didn't he live for years afterwards?
Indeed he did. That's the inconvenient fact often glossed over in the sensational accounts. Howard Carter, arguably the most exposed person to any potential curse, lived for another 17 years, dying at age 64. And many other key members of the excavation team also lived long lives.
So the curse was pretty selective.
It seems so. This fact, however, did little to deter the burgeoning media narrative. Of course, alternative, more rational theories were proposed at the time, things like potentially toxic molds or dormant bacteria, maybe even anthrax spores, being present in the sealed tomb environment for millennia, which could have affected susceptible individuals like Carnarvon, who wasn't in the best health.
But the curse story was just better.
Much better copy. The thrilling perception of a powerful ancient curse just captured the public imagination and has persisted ever since. It's become a massive part of popular culture through countless films, books, TV shows, from the classic Boris Karloff mummy movies right up to modern adventures. It's cemented its place in our collective imagination, largely independent of the scientific explanations.
It really is a compelling story, whether rooted in ancient magic, media hype, or maybe just coincidence and microbes. It shows how deeply the idea of a curse can embed itself. Now, we also need to touch on something slightly different, but related. A group that has tragically often been subjected to harmful narratives associated with misfortune or curses by others, the Romani people. This isn't about curses supposedly cast by them, but about how the narrative of being cursed or bringing bad luck can be weaponized against a group.
This is a crucial contextual point, yes. It's vital for understanding how the concept of misfortune or being cursed can be dangerously projected onto vulnerable populations. The Romani people have endured a long, incredibly painful history in Europe, often characterized as a forgotten but somehow hated culture. They've faced centuries of extreme discrimination, suspicion, forced assimilation, slavery in some regions, and outright violence.
And this culminated tragically during the Holocaust.
Horrifically so. Their persecution during the Holocaust, known as the Parajmos, the devouring in Romani, is often overlooked but was devastating. An estimated 200,000 to possibly over 500,000 Romani people were systematically murdered by the Nazis and their collaborators in concentration camps through mass shootings, forced labor. This represented somewhere between 25% to potentially over 50% of the entire estimated Romani population in Europe at the time, a genocide of staggering proportions relative to their numbers.
A devastating loss, often not given the same attention as the Holocaust of the Jewish people, even though the percentage loss was comparable or even higher.
Exactly. And tragically, this persecution, this imposition of a narrative linking them to criminality, vagrancy, or being somehow unlucky or cursed, didn't end in 1945. It continues in many forms, even into recent decades, manifesting in systemic discrimination, segregation, and periodic outbreaks of violence.
What does that look like on the ground in modern times?
It's heartbreakingly current. For example, one of our sources mentions a high court ruling in Italy, not ancient history, recent times, that essentially ruled it was acceptable to discriminate against Roma on the grounds that they are thieves. That's basically a legal endorsement of a harmful stereotype, stripping them of basic protections based on this imposed narrative of inherent criminality or being bearers of misfortune. We've also seen numerous anti-Romani riots and violent attacks erupting in various parts of Europe over the years, their homes burned, entire communities forced to flee, often with little or no effective protection from authorities.
So this isn't just about ancient folklore anymore. It's about how these deeply prejudiced narratives can function like a modern-day social curse, systematically marginalizing and harming an entire group by associating them with negative traits or misfortunes, completely, regardless of individual actions or beliefs.
Precisely. It becomes an externally imposed societal burden, a curse enacted through prejudice and discrimination. And it stands in such stark contrast to the Romani people's own complex worldview and cultural code, often referred to as Romanipe, which internally emphasizes values like purity, respect, family loyalty, honor, cleanliness, and justice within their own community structures. This tragic history really illustrates how external prejudice can create and sustain a perception of curse entirely separate from and often directly contradicting a group's internal beliefs or practices.
That's a vital distinction.
Mm.
Okay, so we've explored what curses are, who is believed to cast them, their historical uses, and their profound impacts, both personal and societal. But the big question remains, if you find yourself, or perhaps your family, feeling like you're under a perceived curse, what can you actually do about it? How does one go about undoing the unspoken, countering the harm that's believed to have been inflicted?
Well, just as there are ways to cast curses in these traditions, there are also pathways believed to lift them, though they're often complex, demanding, and require significant effort. They aren't usually portrayed as simple or instantaneous fixes, which kind of underscores the perceived gravity and power of a real curse.
So what's the first step usually?
A crucial first step, especially for curses believed to stem from transgression or interpersonal conflict, often involves profound regret and seeking forgiveness. For instance, we talked about parental curses. One source explicitly states that a parental curse remains if the mother has no regrets about uttering it. Her continued anger or lack of remorse sustains its power.
So the cursor's change of heart is key.
It can be, yes. And beyond human forgiveness, seeking forgiveness from God is considered a primary pathway in many traditions, a direct appeal to the ultimate agent of justice we discussed. However, the sources also caution that the outcome is never certain. Divine will isn't always easily swayed or predicted. It requires genuine contrition.
So, personal contrition, seeking forgiveness from the wronged party if possible, and a plea for divine mercy are foundational. What about more formal, institutional interventions? Does the church, or maybe other religious bodies, play a defined role in lifting curses?
Yes, very often. Religious institutions frequently have a defined, ritualized role in counteracting curses, acting as crucial intermediaries between the afflicted individual and the divine. This commonly requires formal acts through the church.
Like what kind of acts?
Things like having a holy mass specifically prayed upon it, a dedicated service invoking communal spiritual power to appeal for divine intervention and release. This is often accompanied by, or requires, a full and sincere confession of sins to a priest.
Why confess?
Confession is seen as a necessary act of purification, an acknowledgement of one's own transgressions or vulnerabilities that might have opened the door to the curse in the first place. It's about clearing the spiritual slate, paving the way for healing and restoration. It highlights the communal and ritualistic aspect. You often can't just lift a serious curse entirely on your own. You need the community's spiritual framework.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about more symbolic acts, maybe folk rituals of reconciliation or cleansing that exist outside of or alongside formal church practices? Are there specific things people did?
Absolutely. These are vital and often deeply symbolic. Folk traditions are rich with rituals aimed at purification and reversal. Examples include things like the drinking of water from sacred objects, like a chalice, or water collected from a holy well, or quite dramatic rituals like washing one's feet and drinking the water used in a specific ritual context.
Drinking foot washing water, that sounds
Yeah.
intense.
It sounds intense, and it's meant to be. These aren't merely hygienic acts. They are profound, metaphorical acts of humility, submission, purification, and accepted offerings. They signify a deep willingness to cleanse oneself, to abase oneself if necessary, to re-enter a state of grace or bounty balance. The core aim of nearly all these rituals is reconciliation with the wronged party, with the community, with nature, or with the divine. Reconciliation is seen as the only force powerful enough to truly restore order and overcome the chaos and misfortune induced by a potent curse. It's about actively unraveling the negative forces through symbolic action.
It really does sound like a kind of counter magic, doesn't it? A deliberate, symmetrical undoing of what was done by the curse. And speaking of symmetry, folk tales are absolutely full of stories about curses being reversed, often involving transformations being undone.
They are, and these tales often serve as powerful moral lessons, vividly illustrating the symmetrical nature of cursing and lifting curses. They show that what can be done can potentially be undone, usually through great effort or virtue. For instance, there's a common folktale trope categorized as T307, the princess turned blood-sucking demon, or similar transformations. These tales explicitly contrast black, representing the curse, the darkness, the monstrous state, with white, symbolizing redemption, purification, the return to light, and humanity.
So the narrative itself emphasizes the reversal.
Exactly. Another classic example is the man turned into stone tale type, T2502. Here, you often have a sorcerer cursing brothers, or a whole wedding party, maybe their horses and carriages too, turning them all into stone as punishment for some transgression. The curse is only reversed through a specific arduous quest undertaken by a hero, often the youngest brother or an outsider. This quest typically involves overcoming obstacles, maybe with the help of magical animals, retrieving a specific magical object like a hidden egg or a talking flower, and performing precise counter rituals at the site of the curse. These narratives hammer home the idea that, as one analysis puts it, the commencement of the plot is the breaching of a ban which results in the main character's quest, in search for a method to get rid of the results of breaching the ban. The whole story is about the undoing.
So the quest itself is the counter curse, the mechanism for reestablishing the broken order. I also recall reading a simpler story about an old man who magically enchanted a disrespectful traveler, maybe made his horse stick fast. And the spell was only undone when the traveler chased down the old man and physically forced him to reverse it.
Yes, that's another common motif. It's a very literal reversal of the causative act, the original cursor being compelled, often through coercion or trickery, to undo their own magical work. These narratives powerfully reinforce the core idea. Just as words, intentions, and actions, particularly those born of ill will or transgression, can bind, harm, and transform negatively, so too can counteractions, virtue, ritual, or force reversal unbind, heal, and restore, provided that the right methods are found and correctly performed. There's always a potential path back, even if it's difficult.
And the ultimate counterforce, the direct opposite of a curse entirely, would have to be blessings. Right? These must be seen as just as powerful, if not maybe even more fundamental, in these folk worldviews, almost like actively building or reinforcing positive reality.
You've hit on a truly crucial point there. Blessings are indeed the direct opposite of curses, and in many ways, yes, they are seen as even more fundamental to establishing and maintaining well-being, prosperity, and good fortune. They involve, as one source puts it, the allocation of fortune's gifts by employing words.
Allocating fortune's gifts, I like that.
Yeah. And like curses, they often combine specific physical gestures. The sign of the cross is very common, laying on of hands with explicit verbal declarations of good wishes, prayers for success, and invocations of divine favor. Blessings hold immense cultural importance for ensuring good fortune, health, happiness, protection, basically everything good in life.
So, thinking back to parental curses, a lack of parental blessing could be seen as almost as detrimental as an active curse, like leaving a void where protection should be.
Absolutely. A lack of parental blessing, especially at key life moments like marriage or leaving home, is widely believed in many folk traditions to lead to a lifetime of misfortune, separation, struggle, even familial neglect or estrangement. Without that foundational spiritual support and approval from your parents, an individual is seen as spiritually vulnerable, adrift, susceptible to all sorts of ill luck or negative influences.
And weddings were a key time for blessings.
Hugely important. Traditional wedding rituals often vividly illustrate this. Couples would ritually kneel before their parents to formally receive their blessings before the ceremony or leaving for their new home. This involved the parents making the sign of the cross over them, perhaps sprinkling them with holy water or grain, and offering heartfelt verbal wishes for happiness all your lives, fertility, prosperity.
Were there other blessing rituals?
Oh, yes. There is mention of a fascinating departure ritual in some Slavic traditions connected to marriage. When a daughter was leaving home, a rug from beneath the parents' feet might be thrown up onto the roof of the house. How it landed, or if it stayed up, was sometimes used as a form of divination, perhaps associated with determining which daughter would marry next, but fundamentally it was about seeking a blessing for future marital success and a smooth transition.
And deathbed blessings. That sounds like a final, incredibly important moment, not just for the children receiving it, but maybe for the dying person as well, to settle things.
It is seen as a profound final act of parental love, responsibility, and transition. Dying individuals often make a point of gathering their children to grant them final blessings, wishing them prosperous lives and happiness after they are gone. These blessings are considered essential not only for the children's future well-being, but also for the dying person themselves, allowing them to peacefully enter the world of the dead, unburdened by any unresolved family conflicts or unspoken wishes.
So it helps both sides find peace.
Yes. And importantly, dying individuals often take this last opportunity to grant forgiveness, even for very serious past transgressions by their children. They do this to ensure they don't carry the heavy burden of resentment, anger, or unresolved sin with them into the afterlife. It powerfully reinforces the importance of reconciliation and blessing right at life's very end.
So blessings aren't just passive good wishes. They're seen as active protective measures, almost like creating a shield of positive energy or invoking divine favor around a person.
Exactly. And this belief translates into everyday protective measures woven into the fabric of daily life. For instance, the simple act of placing a blessed object, like a rosary or a small cross, on a sleeping child isn't just a display of faith. It's seen as a direct, practical way to actively shield them from evil influences, bad dreams, the evil eye, or negative energies while they're vulnerable. It demonstrates the practical, continuous application of blessing in daily life, a constant invocation of good fortune and divine protection, acting as a perpetual counterpoint to the ever-present possibility of curses or misfortune.
Wow, what an incredible journey we've taken, really diving deep into the complex, sometimes dark, but utterly fascinating world of curses. From exploring their intricate linguistic roots, seeing how the very power of the word was understood.
Yeah, the idea that words aren't just labels, but forces.
Exactly. To looking at their diverse historical manifestations, those ancient curse tablets buried in graves, the low magic muttered in medieval villages, and then tracing their profound cultural impact on family structures, social norms, individual destinies, even generational patterns.
It's truly remarkable, isn't it, how consistent some of the underlying principles are, even across vast stretches of time and vastly different cultures.
It really is. And it makes it clear that curses, historically and perhaps even now, aren't just some fringe supernatural phenomenon. They are deeply interwoven with fundamental human understandings of language, of social ethics, of cause and effect, and how we perceive reality itself.
That's a great way to put it. The idea that words are potent, that our intentions truly matter, and that our actions inevitably have consequences, whether we frame those consequences as divine, social, karmic, or magical, that's a powerful thread running through all of this. It's shaped human behavior and societal norms in profound ways for millennia.
And hopefully for you, our listener, this deep dive encourages a bit of reflection on the immense power that words and intentions can hold, even in your own life today. Maybe consider how, even in our highly rational, scientific, modern context, the echoes of these ancient beliefs might still resonate. Perhaps it serves as a potent reminder of the weight of what we say, how carefully we should choose our words, and how consciously we should act towards others. Maybe every utterance, every interaction carries more resonance, more potential impact than we typically acknowledge.
It's certainly food for thought. And it leaves us perhaps with a final provocative question to ponder. In a world that increasingly strives for rationality and scientific explanation for everything, does that magical quality of language, its power to move, to persuade, to harm, to heal, does it still persist, maybe just in new, less overtly supernatural forms?
That's a great question.
And if curses, at their absolute core, are really about cause and effect, about the energy we put out into the world inevitably coming back to us in some form, then how much of this ancient wisdom, this profound understanding of linguistic and moral gravity, still shapes our contemporary lives, our relationships, our popular culture? Even if we don't label it a curse anymore, but maybe call it karma, or blowback, or just consequences.
Maybe the words change, but the underlying dynamic, the belief in the power of our actions and words to shape reality, remains surprisingly constant. Something definitely worth thinking about.